Hey, today we are talking about things you probably didn't know to look for when viewing a house to buy. Let's do it. Hey, I'm Jonathan McCoy with Keller Williams Realty Chattahoochee North, and today we are talking about viewing a home and things that you need to look for in a house that maybe you wouldn't think about. Lots of times, buyers go in and they're thinking granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, open concept, 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, but they fail to look at things that could cost them in the end. So what I've done is I've put together a viewing a house checklist for you of things that you probably didn't know to look for. And we're gonna go over some of those things now. For those that want this checklist to print out, just hit the link below and it'll take you to a site where you can get the checklist. So there are 3 parts to this checklist that we're gonna look at. First part is actually what to do before you even go inside the home. So that's viewing online or going past the house. The second part is once you go inside the house, what to look for. And the third part is things outside the house that would be important to see. So part 1 of your viewing a house checklist is your search online and before you go into the home. Now, looking at pictures. This is the thing that's going to draw you into a home right away. And what people do is they take a look at the pictures, and what they don't focus on is what's not shown. Actually, that's a big deal. What happens lots of times is if, for instance, you see no pictures of a backyard, well, lots of times that means that that backyard just falls straight off. Or maybe there's no pictures of the secondary bathroom or even the master, maybe because it's tiny. So one thing to start with when you're looking at pictures is to note what's not shown. All right, another thing you can do before going out to take a look at home is ask for a seller's disclosure. Ask your agent to give you the seller's disclosure, and the seller's disclosure will be what the seller fills out to tell you about the home. This can give you the age of the roof, age of an HVAC system, if it has termite coverage, what's staying with the house, such as does the refrigerator stay or not, and what's going. So it kind of gives you a history of the home from what the seller knows. Now, in Georgia, seller's disclosures are not required. However, most people have them and give them. So ask your agent if you're working with one. If you're not working with a buyer's agent, you can contact a listing agent, ask them for that seller's disclosure. All right, another thing to look at when you're talking about before you go to the home is actually what you should do is go into Google Maps or some kind of overhead view, all right, and zoom in on the house. This can not only give you an idea of the property and how it sits and if there's a backyard or not, but also look for major roads. So check to see if this house is sitting on or backs up to a major road. That could be if that's a big concern for you, then you can scratch this one off the list. If that doesn't matter for you, then you can move forward. Next, take a look at how far the home that you're considering is from all the things that you want to be close to, such as your work, schools, your parents, friends, whatever it is that you're interested in, make sure that you're close enough to it. Also, look for grocery stores and shopping if that's important to you. All right, so take the time to look at distance. Now, not only should you look at distance from work, but you definitely should look at time to work too during traffic. If you've lived in Georgia for any time, you know that traffic is a bear around Atlanta. And if you haven't, well, now I'm letting you know that traffic can definitely be tough. So what can be just 10 miles away could take you 30, 45 minutes, even an hour, depending on your route. So take a look at the traffic patterns. All right, so this next part is still before you go into the home and set up a viewing, but it does take some time to drive. So what I want you to do is drive to the neighborhood to take a look. Do you like the neighborhood, all right? And then drive by the house itself. If in pictures it really doesn't show you kind of the yard and if it has a yard or not, and the overhead you can't tell on it, then driving by can definitely give you an idea of if you like the yard. Also, no one takes real pictures of the neighbors' houses, so go take a look. If your neighbor has a bright pink house and that bothers you, well, that might not be the house you want to buy. So again, drive to the neighborhood, make sure you like the neighborhood, make sure you like where the house is located at. All right, one final thing to note when you're driving by the neighborhood is get out, stop, and check for noise, road noise, or even neighborhood noise. If you want to drive by in the evening or at night, on the weekends, just to check to see, hey, is this a really noisy neighborhood and I'm looking for quiet? Or maybe you like lots of people out and want to check that out too to see, hey, is the neighborhood constantly having people out? Another thing you can do is stop by a neighbor's house, knock on the door and ask what they think of the neighborhood. Ask if it's important to you to have families around. Check it out to see the families around. And if you have an agent, you can ask your agent to do this as well if they don't know the neighborhood already, to get an idea of the makeup of the neighborhood. All right, you've done all of your research beforehand. You say, hey, this looks like a great house to go to. You set up your time. Now we're going to talk about going into the home and things that you might not pay attention to that you should. So, first of all, you probably pay attention to this, but want to note its smell. When you go into a home, obviously pictures can't show you smell. So, check it out. If it's a cigarette smell, if it's a smell of animals, things like that might be a detractor to you. Note that smells could be hard to get out. So one thing to definitely check out is, are there smells? And then consulting a professional about, okay, if there are, what's the cost of getting rid of those smells? All right, another thing to do when you're in the house is make sure to look up. All right, look up in all the rooms, check for water damage on the ceiling. These are usually brown spots. It could be yellow spots that show up in the ceiling that can indicate a possible leak. Now, just because you see a spot doesn't mean there's an active leak. It could have been taken care of and it just wasn't painted over, but it is something to definitely note. One thing that I have noticed when I'm walking with buyers is sometimes they'll notice the floor and they think right away, oh, these are great floors. However, it's good to look closely. A lot of people like to put in laminate floors in a house, which are fine, I like laminate, but laminate definitely ranges in terms of the quality. And a number of times people put in really cheap laminate. So it's a good idea to take a look down at the laminate. Another thing is a lot of wooden laminate floors are floating floors. So the floors actually connect together almost like a puzzle and they expand and contract. Well, when it's not laid properly, sometimes you'll actually have gaps in the laminate floor that's floating that's really hard to fix. So again, look at the floor, look for gaps, all right, that can possibly be in those laminate or wood floors. And since we're talking about flooring, note if there are rugs down, all right? Sometimes rugs are down just because people like rugs, and that's great. But if you can peek under the rug, take a look. Sometimes they're covering up stains, or if it's on hardwood, scratches in the hardwood. So if you're inside and you see a rug and it's doable and you're not moving furniture around, just lift it up and take a look. The layout. All right, I'm not going to talk much about layout because you'll know if you like the layout of a house or not. However, one thing to note are the location of the air conditioning vents. Now, why I say this is you might look at the layout and say, oh, that's where I'm going to put the couch at. However, there might be a wall or floor vent right where you're going to put the couch, right? You can't do that. You do not want to cover up vents in a house, and sometimes the layout can be set up in a way where it's really hard to figure out where the couch or your chairs are going to go because of the vents. So make sure you note the vents and note that you cannot cover these up as you're looking at especially living spaces or bedrooms. All right, we're gonna talk a little bit about the kitchen now. All right, you're in the kitchen. One thing to do, it's okay to open up cabinets, all right? So open them, close them. The reason why I say this is sometimes you'll open up a cabinet and all of a sudden the cabinet door looks like it's going to fall off. And lots of times people won't note this and maybe go all the way to closing, get in their home, open up a cabinet, and it is not what they thought it's gonna be. While still in the kitchen, look for the pantry. Some people don't even notice that maybe there is no pantry, or they open the pantry and it's very small. So don't forget, open up the pantry, make sure it's the space that you want. All right, one thing that's been a great indicator for me of whether a house is done right, specifically if someone looks like they're flipping a house, is the backsplash actually. I like to look at backsplash if it's there to see how well it's been done. All right, looking at the work that's been done. If it looks like it's been laid neatly, if all the grout and sealant is done correctly, then you have a good indicator that they've paid attention to the small things in the house. Again, it's not always an indicator. You always want a professional come in to inspect the home to make sure it's right. But this is a good start for you. Okay, that concludes part 1 of viewing a house checklist, and make sure to view part 2. We will see you later.